And the journey continues for Hanok Young, traveling all over the United States, causing problems, trouble. Well, no, he's not doing that. Of course not. Not Hanok Young, the most lovable tour guide ever.
How are you, Mike? How are things?
How's that for starting out? I mean, I'm the one that causes the trouble, right, Renault?
Well, listen, it depends. And when both you and I are in the mix, it gets more complicated. As you like to say, and I love when you say it because it's so much more dramatic. But when you point to me and say, because of this guy, I was banned from an entire country. So,
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm about halfway through. Tonight I'll be speaking at House of David in Gloucester, Virginia. And I have to tell you, the humidity in Virginia is better than it was in Louisiana.
Oh, good. Yes.
And better than Florida. So, we're getting better all the time.
Yeah, at least where you're at now, it's safe to breathe without drowning.
Yeah. So then I'll be in Colorado with Bill and Rebecca, speaking there over Shabbat.
Yeah.
Sunday afternoon, I'll be speaking in Austin, Texas. 2 more gigs that week in Texas. Then from there, I go to a place called Franklin, North Carolina.
Yeah, the height of your tour.
Absolutely.
It is. We are looking forward to you being here so much that I'm going out of town that weekend.
Well, I have to say, perfect planning, right, Mike?
Yeah, I know. Planning. So we have numerous people that will take care of you. I'm
not worried. I'm not at all worried. No problem.
What is happening in the land now that you're gone? I mean, I'm sure it's pretty falling apart without your presence there.
Well, it's interesting. Everyone is, now all of a sudden, after more than 30 weeks of demonstrations, people are starting to say, so what's going on in Israel? The news here is still, and again, I don't know why you and I are constantly giving out Israeli news sites. People seem so adverse to looking at it. And again, it's in English. It's not in Hebrew.
Yeah.
But so, I find myself giving the same explanation all the time. And it's what we've got is a political conflict. We've had a political conflict, not just for 75 years of the state of Israel, of the rebirth, but even before then in the pre-state, the labor socialists and, my side of the family. Listen, it is what it is. Meanwhile, you've got this deal percolating between the U.S., Saudi Arabia, and Israel. And so when I pointed out at a recent speaking gig how this is potentially, something that will cause no more communities in Judea and Samaria, and the groundwork for a so-called Palestinian state, etc. They were like, but Netanyahu is your prime minister. And it's like, guys, how many times am I going to walk you through this? And you know what? Someone asked me, because they this constant like, well, who else are you going to vote for? So I explained, we don't vote for the prime minister, we vote for the party.
Yeah.
But then I looked up something. Here's an interesting thing. In the current coalition, the Likud, the leading party of the ruling coalition, received 32 seats. That's 32 out of 120.
Yeah.
Which means they got 26% of the vote. So in America, when you're talking about like this one gets 54%, this one gets 58%, we're talking about 26%. Now, of course, the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox parties, simply vote for whoever they can get into bed with, who will provide them with the funding that they want for their schools and institutions. Yeah. It's as simple as that. They're not involved in the economy, insecurity, or any of those things.
No. So sort of the IDF, all that stuff. So what you're telling me is that Likud actually has a better approval rating than Biden.
Well, that was as of the last election. It would probably be less now.
That's
But,
true.
you
That's
know,
true.
so it is kind of weird. Um, and as I go now, of course, with the groups that I speak to, which are very similar, if not the exact same ones as you speak to, of course, we're not coming across Biden supporters.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to see how people react to things, particularly as I teach about Israel, as I try to deconstruct and explain what terms like Zionism means, to show people what Israel's borders are or aren't. You get some really interesting reactions from people.
Yeah, I'm sure. A couple of questions for you regarding
Sure.
this. I saw that one of the broadcasts, and I'm just kind of pulling this out of memory here. One of the broadcasts from Israel, I think it was more of a similar to the national, NPR on our end, actually called the Galilee occupied territory. Did you see that one?
No, I've
Yeah,
got to look for that. An Israeli source.
an Israeli source. This was on J-Post, I believe it said that the commentator referred to the Galilee as occupied.
Okay, I would need to see that. And the
Yeah,
reason I'm hesitating for a moment is there are sections of the Galil, the Galilee, that are so heavily populated by Israeli Arabs.
yeah.
Now, was it a reference to that, or was it a reference to the Galilee as part of quote unquote occupied Palestine?
It was a reference to the Galilee as occupied Palestine kind of thing. So
Well,
it's basically the spin.
yeah, and this was an Israeli news source.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So the other one, and this is more important. I was listening to someone, and I kind of know some of the answers. I'm just going to throw this out for you, so that our listeners can get it. It is in 19. Is it true or not that Israel have, or does Israel not have a constitution?
We do not have a constitution.
Okay. Now, and I knew that. Here's another tidbit. Was it in the original documents of the institution of Israel in 1948 that within 1 year Israel would have a constitution?
So it appears. In other words, the game plan was that they couldn't come up with a constitution overnight.
Yeah.
There were all kinds of issues and other priorities. And it's like, we're going to get to this because this is important for our democracy. And yes, it has been 75 years and still no constitution.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
And and this was a very I can tell you offline the sources of this. I'm not going to go into it here, but it was being used as a very anti-Israel statement that you guys have you just been sitting around, twiddling your fingers and haven't had anything to do for the last 75 years, except maybe survive. And so this has just never been.
But understand, what people seem to ignore is you don't require a constitution to have a vibrant democracy. Our
Well,
democracy is as good, if not better, than the democracies in the rest of the world.
well, unless you are saying that America is like, the greatest place it's ever been, and unless you're like America, then of course you're, kind of, of the house of Satan or something. This is being used in order for people to say, look at Israel compared to America and how wonderful we are, because we have a constitution that not to really get political here, but most of the government of the United States is not following that Constitution. So, you know, the fact that you guys don't have one, well, you were not trying to be America in 1948, were you?
Never. No, and what's interesting is Israel, and this is an observation that many people share with me. You know, they come to Israel for tours and they leave, you know, because I say, so how different was Israel or not different than what you expected? And the most accurate descriptions are that we are more European in terms of culture, like coffee culture, you know, coffee houses, cafes, and Middle Eastern in terms of cuisine and food. And that although Israelis clearly love America and Americans, Israel's not like a little America. It doesn't feel like America.
Well,
And each of those three observations is totally accurate. And one of the things that, even though everyone knows Israel, and Israel says this too, we're a nation of immigrants. However, the majority of Israelis are native born.
yeah.
That's number one. Number two, in America, if anyone knows anyone that's Jewish, 98% of the time they are of Ashkenazi descent, that their families come from Eastern Europe. In Israel, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Majority are Sephardi or Mizrahi Eastern Jews, Jews who had grown up in, their families grew up in Arab countries, in Muslim-dominated countries.
So, you know, just going back to your European thing, as far as a lot of the culture, I'm not sure if you've seen a map lately, but the last one I saw had Israel actually as part of Europe, or you know, pretty close to that area of the world. So that would be the reason there's a lot of European influence there. The other is, you know, when Israel was established in 1948, um, there there was a lot of, you know, you had all these different cultures, and when someone comes, it's like in America. When I go up into the area you're in, up around Gloucester, what do we have? We have New York. We have, you know, the names that came from Europe. Actually, you know, they were naming things after where they came from,
The old
and so
country.
the culture that they came from definitely affected. You know, America wasn't really standing real close to Israel in 1948, if I remember.
No, particularly when they slapped the arms embargo on us for 19 years, not selling us a single bullet. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So you know, Israel has a lot of influence of America, specifically in the music. You know, when I'm in the vineyards in Shiloh and I'm listening to, you know, the song American Pie, that was kind of weird, but you know, and you're watching, you know, you walk into an Israeli store and you're hearing Elvis. Um, it's a bit on the strange side there. You know, you're not really expecting that the first time.
No,
But yeah,
it's
the
true.
cultures, I mean, to understand, but here's the thing, Hanok, is that it seems that every country wants to make Israel like themselves.
Well, they want Israel to be the better aspect of themselves, meaning
Ah,
that we are supposed to be more moral, and we are supposed to uphold a standard of behavior that the rest of the world isn't held to. It's
yeah,
really amazing. It's
yeah.
really
It's a
it's
good way
it's
to look at it.
it's this, it's almost like putting us up on a pedestal and then putting us on under the magnifying glass, you know, under the microscope of like, and every single thing. It's
Well,
it's
yeah,
just astounding to me.
I would go one step further. It's kind of like putting you on a pedestal, putting you under magnifying glass, and at all the time you're doing that, trying to squash you like a bug.
Well, this is the thing. Someone said to me the other day, it came up as a comment on a live stream that I was doing. And why is it that Israel, who was charged by Hashem with bringing the Torah to the nations, why haven't we been doing more of that?
Okay, and your answer was?
Well, what's interesting is it came up afterwards and I didn't see it, but I've actually addressed this previously. Number one, prior to the state of Israel, being a minority, and for most of that time, having it been illegal to teach Torah to Christians by the laws of their countries.
Yeah.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, in America, why? Well, in America, America's a free country. Jews are a minority here, and the vast majority of Jewish Americans, I say this a million times, are merely Americans who by accident of birth were born of a Jewish mother. They don't know anything in terms of the Torah to be able to teach it to anyone else. They don't see any. How many, come on, how many of our listeners, I want to see if this resonates. How many of our listeners have met a Jewish American or Jewish Canadian and been told by them, you guys are more Jewish than we are? Meaning, yeah, this is, to me, this is like a softball pitch. I know it always comes up. Barry was telling me a story of one of his trips to Israel. He's sitting next to, this happens all the time. Oh, yeah. So the Torah can only come from Israel. Okay. Now, having said that, for 75 years, we had food rationing in the early 50s in Israel. When you get like one egg every couple of days for children. I mean, it was really, really bad. Until now, when we're under constant security threats. And, I was listening to part of a broadcast from our friends, the Israel guys from Hayovel, pointing out the enormous military aid America has given the Lebanese army. The Lebanese army and Hezbollah work hand in hand. It's not like they're on a friendly basis. So all of this is coming against Israel. The Iranian threat. This is, and Hezbollah and Lebanon are merely proxies of Iran. All of this is coming. So how can we take the time and go out to the nations and teach Torah?
It would be kind of like sitting in your apartment in New York, and somebody saying, "Why haven't you finished that painting?" Well, yeah, every time I sit at the chair, somebody fires a bullet through my window. It's just the way it is. I don't know.
Okay.
You're talking about the American Jews that said, well, I've had that happen. This thing of you're more Jewish than I've had that happen in Israel. I was standing there at the overlook of the wall one time, and a lady I struck in a conversation with her somehow, and she said, "So are you Jewish?" I said, "No." And she said, "Well, why are you here?" And I started talking to her about Torah, and she looked at me and she says, "Well, why would you want to live by the Torah?" And I looked at her and said, "Well, somebody needs to."
What a great answer.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I loved it. And there's another aspect here that we could bring out is that coming out of in 1948, those that came into Israel were coming out of the Shoah, the Holocaust.
Okay. Yes, but soon to be followed by 1.5 million Jews from Muslim countries who were expelled.
Yeah.
So yeah. This is, I know that, but just for our listeners listening, that, because people, there's this, it's a misconception that Israel was created as a result of the Holocaust. So Israel was filled with all of these Nitzalei Shoah, survivors of the Holocaust.
Yeah. Now, please correct me as you do when I'm wrong, but
With your permission, just so
yeah,
people think
yes,
yes,
yes.
we know that.
In talking with people, it is my understanding that many of the people that came out of the Shoah moving to Israel were at the best in that day agnostic, some even to the point of atheist because of what they had seen.
Okay. It's first of all, it's very difficult to speak about. I mean,
In generalities, I know.
okay. Well, first of all, the vast majority of the world's Orthodox Jews were slaughtered.
Yeah.
Okay. Having gone through that situation, I mean, there was a time when I was a young boy, like around 10, 11, 12 years old. All of my parents' friends, my parents were American. All of my parents' friends were survivors of the Shoah. There were 3 or 4 couples that my parents were friends with. They all had, I mean, it was, and when you think about it, we're talking about the 1960s.
Yeah.
This was mid to late 60s. So we're talking about less than 25 years after the Shoah. And it seemed to be that people either came out with an on fire faith, and these are the people that remarried and rebuilt families and
Yeah.
even Hasidic dynasties, or those who came out and said, clearly there was no God. You know, if my entire family, if my young children were slaughtered, how could there be a God? So, you know, and I have to tell you, I would never judge people like that.
No.
You can't, you know, you can't.
But I have, as you have, met people that want to.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what kind of faith if I was to go through something like the Shoah and see 6 million people slaughtered, that's just Jewish population, 1.5 million of them being children. Boy, I mean, that offers up some questions that are hard to answer. So for someone to say, well, I would have come out with a great faith because I have read the book of Ezekiel, really? Really? It's one thing to read the book of Ezekiel. It's quite another to watch it happen.
Yeah, well, you know, that's what I call false biblical faith.
Yeah.
And if people want to look and see where, you know, where those verses are, I'll borrow a phrase that I learned from Barry last night. It's in the second book of Hezekiah, you know, chapter 3, verse 8. Go look it up.
Yeah, yeah, I know. So, the purpose of all this, Hanok, to me is just that giving people an honest look. And it's so easy, as I listened to a broadcaster last weekend, it's so easy to judge people, to judge someone else, not knowing what they've been through, not knowing, if you would come out of the Shoah and you were, as a good friend of ours at Itamar, their father was the only surviving member of the family. And you're going to stand in judgment of regarding this person for anything, to say that, well, Israel has had 75 years to get a constitution and be like America and all of these things. Yeah, go over there and be a part of the culture. See what's going on. Carry as I do. I'm sorry, I don't have it with me. Carry as I do, and you know this because you've seen it. A nut that was in one of the bombs that was set off on Ben Yehuda Street. I've carried that on my keychain now for over 21 years, 22 years now, as a reminder that I just don't need to be judging of people that are going through a whole lot more than I am.
And again, let me kind of circle back to this, teaching Torah to the world. How do you bring the Torah and its precepts in a non-missionary manner? In other words, the goal is not to make the world Jewish. The goal is to share the precepts of the Torah. How many people, we know a lot of people that have been kind of, involved in this kind of thing, let's call it.
Mm-hmm.
How many people would be able to walk that fine line? I mean, and I still have people say to me, Hanoch, I'm really surprised you don't go around encouraging people to be Jewish. You teach about Israel. You teach about prophecy, not my own, by the way, but I'm not teaching my own prophecy. No. But of course, my standard walkaway line is, no, we already have enough confused Jews. Don't worry about it. And I walk, but it's a thing that we are dealing with concepts that the world has never dealt with before. People who were not born into a Jewish family, who are incorporating the Torah because they've come to the understanding that that's how Yeshua lived.
Yeah.
And if they follow it, I mean, it's an A plus B equals C. If Yeshua lived this way and it was good enough for him, then of course someone who wants to follow him would be doing that too. Boom.
Yeah. But, there's not, we may go to Revive and see a lot of people there, but in the end, this Hebrew roots, whatever it is, thing that we're involved in today is not big enough to be making an impact. And for those who would say, well, why isn't Israel, being the light to the nations? I would look at them and say, well, why is there less people here in your congregation this year than there was last year?
I have not encountered a congregation on this trip that has not told me that they're wrestling with the issue of membership, attendance, attracting, and even more so, retaining people. I have repeatedly pointed out, sadly, how many people that I've known that have walked away from this whole thing and just dropped it and walked away. And I don't know everybody.
Yeah, maybe we should be looking at a different answer, and maybe that's something we talk about when you're here in Franklin, is the message that we have, which is that there is one God, and there is, in my estimation, one set of instructions to those who follow that one God is not a message that most people want to hear.
The day, it seems to be a real shock to people when they find out that I did not grow up in a religiously observant family.
Yeah.
Which again shows the kind of disconnect of what they think Jewish people are. So as they struggle with it, they ask me, so when did I stop being an atheist or stop being agnostic? And I said, you guys understand, I always believed in God. I never doubted that there was a God. I wasn't aware as a kid that he actually expected things of me and required things of me. And once I realized that, and then once I made the conscious decision that I want to do that, life was different. But I was never an agnostic. And when people say, well, it's the pagan influence, it's not the pagan influence. We don't have pagan influence in the United States of America. People aren't worshiping the mailbox and the tree. We have hedonism. People want to do what feels good. People want to do what feels good.
Yeah. You know, there's,
And whether, you know, it's strange.
it's funny. We're running out of time. It's funny that how you said, you know, you always believed in God, but it was just like, well, I don't see him being relevant to me at the more at the moment.
Well, he didn't require anything of me. He didn't
Yeah,
send me, he didn't make me call me on the phone. I didn't
yeah,
know.
and that's kind of like the statement you've heard me. It's funny we could use the same example, and people don't really understand how we are in the same book, but we sure do have a different way of looking at the same book, and that's fine. We worked that out, which is the beauty of it all. But you've heard me say in my introduction many times that I grew up Southern Baptist, then I got saved. Our our walk is not really a lot different. And many
It's
people grew up in a church, going to vacation Bible school, going to training union, to Sunday school, to big church, to all those things. And they walked away not believing that God had anything for them,
yeah,
they were not responsible to him,
yeah.
not seeing his relevance in their life. And then later on, they went, wow, he is here and he's always been here with me. And I guess I need to develop this walk with him. Um, yeah, that's kind of the same as a lot of people are doing these days.
Well, you know, you either look inside yourself or you look outside yourself.
Yeah,
Now, outside yourself could be drugs, alcohol, and a million other vices. Inside yourself is a much more painful, much more delayed gratification, and it's a choice. It's all about choices.
got that. Got that. All right. Well, hey, enjoy your evening tonight with the House of David crowd. Please give them my regards and tell them to send
I
me an
certainly will.
email with those who are wanting to join us for 2024.
Sure enough.
All right.
See
See you
y'all.
soon.
Bye bye.